Good morning. Thank you for joining me today for scripture study. We are in the Book of Mormon, Alma chapter 51 today, and we might be able to get through 2 chapters. I don't know. Let's see how long this one is. 30. Yeah, we might be able to. So we're still talking about the Nephites versus the Lamanites. That's a bulk of the Book of Mormon, includes that. In this particular series of chapters, couple of chapters right here, we're talking about Captain Moroni and Amalickiah. These two phenomenal military leaders that have been placed against each other on the earth. In this chapter, some really interesting movements happen in the people. Now, as we've pointed out and noticed, as the people keep the commandments, they prosper. But the problem is when we prosper, we tend to forget to keep the commandments. We tend to get comfortable with where we are, and we tend to want more of this or that or whatever. And we dive into things that we shouldn't be involved in. And in this particular chapter, some of that kind of thing happens. And we've got another character that's going to be introduced, another very good man named Pehoran. And we're going to talk about him amongst these other, amongst the rest of the story. Chapter 51 of Alma. And now it came to pass in the commencement of the 25th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi, they having established peace between the people of Lehi and the people of Morianton concerning their lands, and having commenced in the 25th year in peace, nevertheless they did not long maintain an entire peace in the land, for there began to be a contention among the people concerning the chief judge Pehoran. For behold, there were a part of the people who desired that a few particular points of the law should be altered. But Pehoran would not alter nor suffer the law to be altered. Therefore he did not hearken to those who had sent in their voices with their petitions concerning the altering of the law. And if you've ever served in a public service position, this is a remarkably hard thing to do. I mean, everybody says, oh, I would do that if I was there. But once you're there making the decisions and you have half the room that's going to love you and half the room that's going to despise you, it's actually remarkably hard to make some of these decisions publicly. Privately, yeah, we quarterback, armchair quarterback all day long, or whatever you call it. But Pehoran really shows his integrity by avoiding and ignoring these people who want to destroy the law of the land, because they have good laws. They were established by good kings, good men, and so they have good laws. Therefore, those who were desirous that the law should be altered were angry with him, and desired that he should no longer be chief judge over the land. Therefore there arose a warm dispute concerning the matter, but not unto bloodshed. And it came to pass that those who were desirous that Pehoran should be dethroned from the judgment seat were called kingmen, for they were desirous that the law should be altered in a manner to overthrow the free government and to establish a king over the land. And you know, this is just blind. You can tell that these people who want this are not studying their scriptures. They are not remembering the history of their own people. They are not focusing on the good words of their good King Mosiah, who pointed out that was a bad decision. They're not focusing on the king the words of Nephi, who was their first ruler, who also pointed out that this is a bad idea, that the organization of government that they had was a very, very good thing. And you'll find out why they want a king here in just a second. It's kind of sad. And those who were desirous that Pehoran should remain chief judge over the land took upon them the name of freemen. And thus was the division among them, for the freemen had sworn or covenanted to maintain their rights and privileges of their religion by a free government. And it came to pass that this matter of their contention was settled by the voice of the people. And it came to pass that the voice of the people came in favor of the freemen. And Pehoran retained the judgment seat, which caused much rejoicing among the brethren of Pehoran, and also many of the people of liberty, who also put the kingmen to silence, that they durst not oppose, but were obliged to maintain the cause of freedom. Now those who were in favor of kings were those of high birth, and they sought to be kings, and they were supported by those who sought power and authority over the people. Isn't that sad? They consider themselves to be better or higher than the other people, and they sought the seat. In my experience, anyone who seeks the seat of high authority or of authority of some kind over the people shouldn't have it. Whether it's a police officer or a a city official or a state official, a government official of some kind, or a king, if they are seeking that seat because they consider themselves of high birth, they should not have that seat. They should not be there. They'll only make problems. But behold, so remember who we're talking about here, even though they don't bring up his name very much. Amalickiah is still the king of the Lamanites. He has still suffered a really severe defeat because the Nephites were supported by their God. Amalickiah has cursed God and sworn in his wrath to drink the blood of Moroni, Captain Moroni. And Amalickiah has a plan he's going to put into place. And it's devious. It is ugly. Holy cow. Amalickiah is one of the most cunning, conniving, evil leaders that I've ever heard of. I'm deeply impressed with his prowess, and what a waste of a life. The good that he could have done with the incredible intelligence that he had is just astounding. It's remarkable. And he chose to completely waste everything that he was capable of. Verse 9. But behold, this was a critical time for such contentions to be among the people of Nephi. For behold, Amalickiah had again stirred up the hearts of the people of the Lamanites against the people of the Nephites. And he was gathering together soldiers from all parts of his land and arming them and preparing for war with all diligence. For he had sworn to drink the blood of Moroni. Well, I guess I didn't need to elaborate that. The scriptures take care of it for me. But behold, we shall see that his promise which he made was rash. Nevertheless, he did prepare himself and his armies to come to battle against the Nephites. Now, his armies were not so great as they had hitherto been because of the many thousands who had been slain by the hand of the Nephites. But notwithstanding their great loss, Amalickiah had gathered together a wonderfully great army, insomuch that he feared not to come down to the land of Zarahemla. Yea, even Amalickiah did himself come down at the head of the Lamanites, and it was in the 20 and 5th year of the reign of the judges, and it was at the same time that they had begun to settle the affairs of their contentions concerning the chief judge Pehoran. Now, it doesn't say some of the things that I believe have happened here in the story. It's not doctrinal, so you have to take what I say carefully, pray about it, see if you get the same answer that I feel is correct. Isn't it interesting that Amalickiah, who is an expert at fraud and causing contention in a people so that he can gain power over them, isn't it interesting that it's during his time that this contention starts to happen during the Nephites also? It's almost the same contention that happened among the Lamanites. Not exactly, but it's got some similar threads there. And that's something to really think about. And Amalickiah himself, he is willing to come in the flesh to head his army this time where he didn't come last time. He is here with his army to wage war on the Nephites, and something happens while he dares to be there in person, and while this really strange contention of kingmen is happening among the people of the Nephites. I don't see it as coincidental. I see it as orchestrated, very possibly. And again, that's not doctrinal, so be careful with what I say. But take a look at what happens and see if it doesn't match with what Amalickiah is known for, is what we already know of him. And it came to pass that when the men who were called kingmen had heard that the Lamanites were coming down to battle against them, they were glad in their hearts, and they refused to take up arms, for they were so wroth with the chief judge and also with the people of liberty that they would not take up arms to defend their country. And it came to pass that when Moroni saw this, and also saw that the Lamanites were coming into the borders of the land, he was exceedingly wroth because of the stubbornness of those people whom he had labored with so much diligence to preserve. Yea, he was exceedingly wroth. His soul was filled with anger against them. And I think it's really important to point out, I could be wrong about my assumption that I'm making here, but I'm going to share it when we get there, and we'll see what happens. In this particular verse, we're told to be peacemakers. We're told to be to avoid anger. Moroni seems to have a lot of anger. But I want you to pay attention to what he's angry about. Verse 14, one more time, just listen carefully. It came to pass that when Moroni saw this, that they would not take up arms to defend their country. When Moroni saw this and also saw the Lamanites were coming into the borders of the land, he was exceedingly wroth because of the stubbornness of those people whom he had labored with so much diligence to preserve. Yea, he was exceedingly wroth. His soul was filled with anger against them. Why would he be angry about this? Because this is a recipe for the loss of freedom of the people. This is a recipe for destruction. When the people behind you that you are giving your life to defend, when they refuse to support you in that cause and your enemies are at your gates, yeah, I can see Moroni being frustrated by that because he doesn't even want to be there. He doesn't even want to fight that battle. He is not a man of blood, but he will fight to keep safe the freedoms of his people. It is really remarkable. Moroni in chapter 15, it came to pass that he sent a petition with the voice of the people unto the governor of the land, desiring that he should read it and give him, Moroni, power to compel those dissenters to defend their country or put them to death. And, as I read this particular section, when I first read it, I remember thinking to myself, wow, Moroni is really an aggressive man. He's not a good man. He's got to be, not entirely, right? Because he's inciting hatred and anger toward the people. No, that's not what he's doing. I was incorrect on that one. Moroni's right. He is right. And if we pay attention to what's going on, we will find out how very correct he is. This is verse 16, for it was his first care to put an end to such contentions and dissensions among the people. For behold, this had been hitherto a cause for all their destruction. And it came to pass that it was granted according to the voice of the people. And it came to pass that Moroni commanded that his army should go against those king men and pull down their pride and their nobility and level them with the earth, or they should take up arms and support the cause of liberty. And it came to pass that the armies did march forth against them, and they did pull down their pride and their nobility, insomuch that they did lift their weapons of war to fight against the men of Moroni, as they did lift their weapons of war to fight against the men of Moroni, they were hewn down and leveled to the earth. These pampered, pompous nobility fighting against these warriors who have been prepared and armed and armored. Yeah. And it came to pass that there were 400 of those dissenters who were hewn down by the sword, and those of their leaders who were not slain in battle were taken and cast into prison, for there was no time for their trials at this period. And the remainder of those dissenters, rather than be smitten down to the earth by the sword, yielded to the standard of liberty and were compelled to hoist the title of liberty upon their towers and in their cities, and to take up arms in defense of their country. They probably did that very spitefully, very angrily. And thus Moroni put an end to those king men that were not any, and that there were not any known by the appellation of king men. And thus he put an end to the stubbornness and the pride of those people who professed the blood of nobility. And they were brought down to humble themselves like unto their brethren and fight valiantly for the freedom from bondage. And behold, it came to pass that while Moroni was thus breaking down the wars and contentions among his own people and subjecting them to peace and civilization and making regulations to prepare for war against the Lamanites, behold, the Lamanites had come into the land of Moroni, which was on the borders by the seashore, in the borders by the seashore. And it came to pass that the Nephites were not sufficiently strong in the city of Moroni. Therefore Amalickiah did drive them, slaying many. And it came to pass that Amalickiah took possession of the city, yea, possession of all their fortifications. And I can see Amalickiah being very smug at that. And those who fled out of the city of Moroni came to the city of Nephihah. And also the people of the city of Lehi gathered themselves together and made preparations and were ready to receive the Lamanites to battle. But it came to pass that Amalickiah would not suffer the Lamanites to go against the city of Nephihah to battle, but kept them down by the seashore, leaving men in every city to maintain and defend it. And thus he went on, taking possession of many cities in the city of Nephihah, and the city of Lehi, and the city of Morianton, and the city of Omner, and the city of Gid, and the city of Mulek, all of which were on the east borders by the seashore. And so right here, how did he know? How did Amalickiah know that the Nephites were not sufficiently strong in the city of Moroni? I believe that Amalickiah had spies. They were Nephites that were dissenters from the Nephites. I believe he sent his spies back into the city so that they could seek out and find which cities were the least fortified. It goes in line with what Amalickiah is. Now, again, that's not doctrinal because it doesn't specifically say that as far as I've ever seen, but it makes sense to me. And that's how he would know where to hit them. That's what he did to begin with, is he used the knowledge of the people that were once Nephites to know where the Nephites were the weakest. And he went against those cities and was disappointed because Moroni saw what was coming. It makes sense to me. I think that it's correct. And thus the Lamanites obtained by the cunning of Amalickiah so many cities, by their numberless hosts, all of which were strongly fortified after the manner of fortifications of Moroni, all of which afforded strongholds for the Lamanites. So he probably, it points out that he used his cunning. He probably also put rebellious, oh my goodness. He probably also put men in the cities to help overtake them from the inside. That would be cunning on his part to do so, and he would have to use dissenters, traitors of the Nephites to do that. And it came to pass that they marched to the borders of the land bountiful, driving the Nephites before them and slaying many. But it came to pass that they were met by Teancum, who had slain Morianton and headed his people in his flight. And it came to pass that he headed Amalickiah also, and he was marching forth with his numerous army that he might take possession of the land bountiful, and also the land northward. But behold, he met with disappointment by being repulsed by Teancum and his men, for they were great warriors. For every man of Teancum did exceed the Lamanites in their strength and in their skill of war, insomuch that they did gain advantage over the Lamanites. And it came to pass that they did harass them, insomuch that they did slay them even until it was dark. And it came to pass that Teancum and his men did pitch their tents in the borders of the land bountiful. And Amalickiah did pitch his tents in the borders on the beach by the seashore, and after this manner they were driven. And it came to pass that when the night had come, Teancum and his servants stole forth and went out by night and went into the camp of Amalickiah. And behold, sleep had overpowered them because of their much fatigue, which was caused by the labors in the heat of the day. And it came to pass that Teancum stole privily into the tent of the king and put a javelin to his heart, and he did cause the death of the king immediately, that he did not awake his servants. And he returned again privily to his own camp, and behold, his men were asleep, and he awoke them and told them all the things he had done. And he caused that his army should stand in readiness, lest the Lamanites had awakened and should come upon them. And thus ended the 20 and 5th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi, and thus ended the days of Amalickiah. Now, granted that Amalickiah is gone, but it makes sense that any of the efforts he's already put into place would still remain. Anything that he's already started, any plans he's orchestrated. I think that there was some there, and I need to be careful. I shouldn't speculate, but it makes sense to me, and it makes a little bit more sense of the story to me with this thought. Let's get into chapter 52. And now it came to pass in the 20 and 6th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi, behold, when the Lamanites awoke on the first morning of the first month, behold, they found Amalickiah was dead in his own tent. And they also saw that Teancum was ready to give them battle on that day. And now when the Lamanites saw this, they were affrighted, and they abandoned their design in marching into the land northward, and retreated with all their army into the city of Mulek, and sought protection in their fortifications. And it came to pass that the brother of Amalickiah was appointed king over the people, and his name was Ammoron. Thus King Ammoron, the brother of King Amalickiah, was appointed to reign in his stead. And it came to pass that he did command his people that his people should maintain those cities which they had taken by the shedding of blood, for they had not taken any cities, save they had lost much blood. And now Teancum saw that the Lamanites were determined to maintain those cities which they had taken, and those parts of the land which they had obtained possession of. And also seeing the enormity of their number, Teancum thought it was not expedient that he should attempt to attack them in their forts. You know, Teancum is another one of these really great guys. Amazing man. But he kept his men round about as if making preparations for war. Yea, he truly was preparing to defend himself against them by casting up walls round about and preparing places of resort. And it came to pass that he kept thus preparing for war until Moroni had sent a large number of men to strengthen his army. And Moroni also sent orders unto him that he should retain all the prisoners who fell into his hands, as the Lamanites had taken many prisoners, that he should retain all the prisoners of the Lamanites as a ransom of those whom the Lamanites had taken. But he also sent orders unto him that he should fortify the land bountiful and secure the narrow pass which led into the land northward, lest the Lamanites should obtain that point and should have power to harass them on every side. And Moroni also sent unto him, desiring him that he would be faithful in maintaining that quarter of the land, that he would seek every opportunity to scourge the Lamanites in that quarter, as much as was in his power, that perhaps he might take again by stratagem or some other way those cities which had been taken out of their hands, and that he also would fortify and strengthen the cities round about which had not fallen into the hands of the Lamanites. And he said unto him, I would come unto you, but behold, the Lamanites are upon us in the borders of the land by the west sea, and behold, I go against them. Therefore I cannot come unto you. Now the king, Amaron, had departed out of the land of Zarahemla, and made known unto the queen concerning the death of his brother, and had gathered together a large number of men, and had marched forth against the Nephites on the borders by the west sea. And thus he was endeavoring to harass the Nephites, and to draw away part of their forces to that part of the land, while he had commanded those whom he had left to possess the cities which they had taken, that they should also harass the Nephites on the borders by the east sea, and should take possession of their lands as much it was in their power, according to the power of their armies. And thus were the Nephites in those dangerous circumstances in the ending of the 26th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi. And please pay attention and notice that when the people were turning their hearts to God and depending on him, the efforts of Moroni, the efforts of Helaman, the efforts were enough to keep them safe. It was when they allowed dissensions to come among them, when kingmen arose, when these problems, in these inner turmoil problems came about, and the people got prideful and they stopped remembering what was important, that the Lamanites were able to get any victory over them. I think that's really, really fascinating. But behold, it came to pass in the 27th year of the reign of the judges that Teancum, by the command of Moroni, who had established armies to protect the south and west borders of the land, and had begun his march toward the land of Bountiful, that he might assist Teancum with his men in retaking the cities which they had lost. And it came to pass that Teancum had received orders to make an attack upon the city of Mulek, and retake it if it were possible. And it came to pass that Teancum made preparations to make an attack upon the city of Mulek, and march forth with his army against the Lamanites. But he saw that it was impossible that he could overpower them while they were in their fortifications. Therefore he abandoned his designs, and returned again to the city Bountiful, to wait for the coming of Moroni, that he might receive strength to his army. You know, what a position to be in. So first, Moroni arms his people with armor, and that gives them the edge against their enemies. Well, then their enemy says, we can have armor, so they arm themselves. Now Moroni has to outthink his own design. So what does he do? Well, he fortifies the cities with heaps of earth and pickets and moats and things. And that works because he's again outthought his enemy through the intelligence afforded him through personal revelation in his own duties from God, because he was a good man. He was able to do that. Well, now his enemies have, because of inner turmoils, his enemies have overcome some of his fortifications, and now they own some of his intelligence. Now he has to, again, outthink his own designs, outthink the intelligence given to him by the Savior, and as the people turn to the Savior, he is able to do that, and it's really fascinating. Now, instead of armor and instead of fortifications, now they're going to do it by strategy. And it's really cool to see some of these intelligent strategies that they come up with. And it came to pass that, verses 18, it came to pass that Moroni did arrive with his army at the land of Bountiful in the latter end of the 27th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi. And in the commencement of the 28th year, Moroni and Teancum and many of the chief captains held a council of war, what they should do to cause the Lamanites to come out against them to battle, or that they might by some means flatter them out of their strongholds, that they might gain advantage over them and take again the city of Mulek. And it came to pass that they sent embassies to the army of the Lamanites, which protected the city of Mulek, to their leaders, whose name was Jacob, desiring him that he would come out with his armies to meet them upon the plains between the two cities. But behold, Jacob, who was a Zoramite, would not come out with his army to meet them upon the plains. And it came to pass that Moroni, having no hopes of meeting them upon fair grounds, Therefore he resolved upon a plan that he might destroy the Lamanites out of their strongholds. Therefore he caused that Teancum should take a small number of men and march down near the seashore. And Moroni and his army by night marched in the wilderness on the west of the city Mulek. And thus on the morrow, when the guards of the Lamanites had discovered Teancum, they ran and told it unto Jacob their leader. And it came to pass that the armies of the Lamanites did march forth against Teancum, supposing by their numbers to overpower Teancum because of the smallness of his numbers. And as Teancum saw the armies of the Lamanites coming out against him, he began to retreat down by the seashore northward. And it came to pass that when the Lamanites saw that he began to flee, they took courage and pursued them with vigor. And while Teancum was thus leading away the Lamanites who were pursuing them in vain, behold, Moroni commanded that a part of his army who were with him should march forth into the city and take possession of it. And thus they did, and slew all those who had been left to protect the city, yea, all those who would not yield up their weapons of war. And thus Moroni had obtained possession of the city of Mulek with a part of his army, while he marched with the remainder to meet the Lamanites when they should return from their pursuit of Teancum. And it came to pass that the Lamanites did pursue Teancum until they came near the city Bountiful. And then they were met by Lehi and a small army which had been left to protect the city Bountiful. And now behold, when the chief captains of the Lamanites had beheld Lehi and his army coming against them, they fled in much confusion, lest perhaps they should not obtain the city Mulek before Lehi should overtake them. For they were wearied because of their march, and the men of Lehi were fresh. Now the Lamanites did not know that Moroni had been in their rear with his army, and they all feared. all they feared was Lehi and his men. Now Lehi was not so desirous to overtake them till they should meet Moroni and his army. It's just brilliant. And it came to pass that before the Lamanites had retreated far, they were surrounded by Nephites, by the men of Moroni on one hand, by the men of Lehi on the other, all of whom were fresh and full of strength. But the Lamanites were wearied because of their long march. And Moroni commanded his men that he should fall upon them until they had given up their weapons of war. And, it seems like a bloodthirsty act of Moroni to fall upon them in their wearied state when they've got the advantage over them. But no, it's important that it points out until they had given up their weapons of war. If they won't fight, neither will Moroni. He's not there to fight. He's there to put an end to fighting. It's really incredible. Verse 33, and it came to pass that Jacob, being their leader, being also a Zoramite, and having an unconquerable spirit, he led the Lamanites forth to battle with exceeding fury against Moroni. Moroni being in their course of march, therefore Jacob was determined to slay them and cut his way through to the city of Mulek. But behold, Moroni and his men were more powerful, therefore they did not give way before the Lamanites. And it came to pass that they fought on both hands with exceeding fury, and there were many slain on both sides, yea, and Moroni was wounded, and Jacob was killed. And Lehi pressed upon their rear with such fury with his strong men that the Lamanites in the rear delivered up their weapons of war, and the remainder of them, being much confused, knew not whither to go or to strike, because their leader had been killed. Now Moroni, seeing their confusion, he said unto them, If you will bring forth your weapons of war and deliver them up, behold, we will forbear shedding your blood. And it came to pass that when the Lamanites had heard these words, their chief captains, all those who were not slain, came forth and threw down their weapons of war at the feet of Moroni, and also commanded their men that they should do the same. But behold, there were many who would not, and those who would not deliver up their swords were taken and bound, and their weapons of war were taken from them, and they were compelled to march with their brethren forth into the land Bountiful. And now the number of prisoners who were taken exceeded more than the number of those who had been slain, yea, more than those who had been slain on both sides. And that's a pretty dangerous position to be in also, to have such a huge number of enemy prisoners, because that's tough to guard. Oh my goodness, I love this stuff. Let's jump into chapter 53 next time. I just love this stuff. I love the Book of Mormon. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day. I share my testimony with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.